Welcome to Business Talk here on Business Tech. And this week, we're talking about probably one of the most critical issues in South Africa, entrepreneurship and small business. And when we talk about entrepreneurship, the conversation is often dominated by talk of funding gaps or failure rates and red tape. But what if there was a model that not only defied the odds, but quietly built a 90% business survival rate across over 7,000 ventures, many in rural areas, led by women and youth and people with disabilities? Today, I'm joined by Bridgit Evans, who's the Executive Director of the SAB Foundation. And she's a woman who's been at the coalface of this kind of social innovation for over a decade. And Bridgit, it's great to have you on the show to unpack the findings of your 2024 impact report. Because the work that you're doing, I think if we could replicate DNA strands of that throughout the economy, is exactly the kind of shift that the country so desperately needs. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's just start with a big picture view. Over the last decade, the SAB Foundation has supported, it's over 7,000, you can give us the exact number of entities, with a staggering 90% still operational. We hear that generally it's the other way around. Around 90% of businesses fail within the first 2 years. So, I mean, if there's a magic formula behind the success rate in a country where small businesses are notoriously fragile, you seem to have got it. At a high level, what's behind that kind of number and that kind of impact?
Well, I think it's really, there's no magic bullet. And I think it really has to do with the intensity with which we work. So the programs that we run are very intensive and really try and address all elements of why businesses fail, which we all know it's finance, it's markets, it's HR, it's costing and pricing. There's a whole multitude of reasons. However, there's also a very important personal component to that, and that is to develop the entrepreneur as a leader and provide a lot of coaching and mentoring to actually help that entrepreneur see themselves as a leader. And then we never really say goodbye to them. So they're welcome to contact us. Once the formal programming is over, they're welcome to stay in touch with us, and we're always looking for new opportunities for them. But I think, the entrepreneurs describe our programs as life-changing. And I think a lot of it has to do with finding a community of peers that are in the same boat as you, and really this desire to do well and to sort of work hard at that. But the access to markets piece, all of those things are really critically important. And then, of course, because we know financing is an issue, we've added second rounds of funding to entrepreneurs who struggle to access commercial finance, where we believe that this entrepreneur has a really solid model. I think another one of our strengths is our measurement. So because entrepreneurs submit surveys to us for 5 years, and every time they receive further support from us, it triggers another 5 years. And what that does is you cannot tell how well you can't claim to have changed an entrepreneur's life while they're on your program. You really have to look at what happens after they leave. And does that business continue to do well? Does it continue to grow post your intervention? So we want to see that, and we want to understand it. And also we ask entrepreneurs to give us feedback on what they think we can improve. And so because of that constant feedback, we make sure that we're always staying relevant. So like, for example, a number of years ago, quite a lot of entrepreneurs telling us that they really needed to have more digital skills training. As businesses, when, the whole transition after COVID, things went online so quickly. And so adding that to our programming and really, so that's the thing, is that we're very responsive to their needs. We continuously improve the program, and we stay in touch with them afterwards and continue to look for market access opportunities for them.
And I think all of that, the golden thread linking through it is that you take a deep long-term journey and view with the entrepreneur. It's not a quick in and out, it's not a 6-month accelerator program. And, one hears about all of these enterprise and supplier development interventions. And at the end of them, very often the individuals who are selected to go through these programs feel like they're kind of left a little bit high and dry. There's no contract at the end of it, and they also realize that they need mentorship, they need help, because we don't have the underpin of that financial acumen, business understanding underneath. But I want to come back to the measurement culture, because I think that's really important, just to tease out as a lesson for government. Do you think South African corporates and government, like CEDA, for example, are doing enough to measure the real impact of their small business development efforts? Or are we still focused on kind of disbursement rather than outcomes?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I've been banging on about this for 10 years. We are dismal at measuring the impact of what we've achieved, and that you're absolutely right. Like, entrepreneurs come and go on these programs and we have no idea. Was the program successful or wasn't it? And if it wasn't successful, what can you do to make it successful? Because we're not even asking those questions. And so what you're seeing is a lot of money getting poured in. But, people are, I've spoken to a few people recently that are very critical of our SME sector, saying, it's not creating the jobs, and it's not. But I have to be honest and say that I have seen a maturing of SMEs overall over the last 10 years. And I do think that attending multiple programs for them has definitely helped transition them from, where entrepreneurs were before, when they were just operating on their own. But as a country, we need jobs. And if we need jobs, we have to get serious about measurement, because how can you keep training and training and training if it's not delivering results? So that's my concern. Yeah. I know.
It's a definition of madness. We're doing the same thing over and over, and we're expecting different results. And that's why I think fundamentally we've got to move to a more outcomes-based policy and attitude in corporates and government. You mentioned that it's an iterative programmatic design. So if you were to look back at a decade of continuous impact measurement, what program design tweaks have emerged for you as the most important, or maybe the most painful lessons that you've learned over the last 10 years?
I would say the lack of financial knowledge is painful, because we do the training and we realize that it's actually that in itself should be like, it's almost like you have to focus on that continually over a period of time. You can't do a course on it. It doesn't work. So that's been a bit of a painful lesson for me. So I would say that's a big one. And then, the feedback we get, it's generally quite positive. And I'm not just saying that, it is positive. And I think it's because entrepreneurs don't feel like a number. They feel like we really care about them. And so we do tend to get mostly positive feedback. It's just really more, are there things they want us to incorporate more into our training? Like I said, the digital skills. Even though they don't want to do more financial literacy, we know that it's now, so now we don't have, instead of having like a workshop on finance, we have basically a ongoing webinar-based training, and it's around personal money habits, and then it moves into business money habits, and really trying to shift that kind of thinking so that entrepreneurs realize how important that is for their business, and also try and deal with those psychological blocks. Why are they avoiding numbers? Why are they avoiding their finances? So I think, so I think it's small things mostly. It's not like, but the finance thing has been a big eye opener for me. And I'll be honest, we only really picked it up when we launched a loan fund 2 years ago. And the loan fund is only open to graduates of our programs. And when we started that fund, we thought, we'll just, they'll send us their finances, we'll have a look, and we'll give them a loan, and then we'll monitor the loan. Oh gosh, we could not have been more wrong.
A crash course in underwriting to SMEs, yeah.
Absolutely. So we actually realized we have to help build those records, to build the picture of that business, to understand the risk, to then lend to them, and then put in serious financial coaches, and in many cases actually appoint them an external financial manager into that business for like a period of a year or whatever. One last thing on the impact measurement, my board came to me a number of years ago and I said, okay, here's the impact. And they said, okay, well, but is that good or bad? And I said, that's the problem. I can't tell you if it's good or bad because there's no one to benchmark ourselves against, And so that's been a challenge for me because, all I know is what we've done. I don't know. I know entrepreneurs are happy. I know we have achieved results, but are there others out there that have achieved better results? I don't know.
Yeah, well, certainly in terms of the averages, what you've achieved, far exceeds what the average failure rates are for entrepreneurs across the board. But I agree with you. I think we need to do more research. Who funds it? Who leads that kind of project? That's really what the Department of Small Business Development should be doing. I know I wrote a rather scathing column, and I meant every word of it in the Business Day a couple of weeks ago when I said we've really got to rethink how we approach the support at the government level for SMEs. And you touch on a very interesting point around financial coaches and talking about money, even at a personal finance level, because you're an entrepreneur and you're getting yourself into debt personally, and you're taking money out of the business there to cross-subsidize another area of your life. It can create huge stress on the entrepreneur. But I don't think we talk about money as South Africans. We're very conservative. Across cultures, we don't tend to talk about money around the dinner table. So I want to touch on this financing because you created this financing ecosystem, if you will, that includes grant funding, you've got interest-free loans, you've got concessionary loans, and now even a finance for impact program. It's blended. Is this the way it has to be in order to lower that cost of capital in the South African context, where so many entrepreneurs, I think, are just locked out, but because of that cost of capital? They could go to a micro lender, but then they're paying 30% a month.
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenging area. And what most lenders do is they price for that risk. And so we haven't done that because, that's a double-edged sword. You pass that interest on to the entrepreneur and then they start defaulting. And so it reiterates the view that everyone has on how risky entrepreneurs are. So, but I do think some blended funding is needed, particularly I think that you can't just in this target market. And I mean, the entrepreneurs that we have done loans, I just want to be clear, many of them are rural businesses, township businesses. And, average turnover when they receive those loans is, the average turnover across the loans we've done is like 3-4 million rand a year. They're small. They grow significantly, but they're small. And so those types of businesses, you can't just give them a loan and walk away. You just have to walk a journey with those entrepreneurs. And I don't think you're going to get proper loan repayments without that. And I think that as a country, we almost need to say, okay, well, we've got this gap. On the one hand, people are filling that gap with very high interest loans and people are defaulting and basically businesses are shutting down. Or do we as a country say, okay, right, we need to actually blend grant and loan funding to provide affordable loans because our priority is not profit. Our priority is job creation. And that for me is where we should work with government on that. And we are working with government on that.
Bridgit, on that point, then, if we were to scale this, that kind of support for entrepreneurs being a lot more hands-on with them does sound like it's quite capacity intensive. But you did mention earlier that you've got webinars, for example. So I'd imagine that you're kind of leaning into technology to scale the interventions that you're offering. Maybe you could just share some lessons on how you've done this from a capacity perspective.
Well, I mean, and this is part of the challenge, is it is about relationships. So we in our lending, we've been lending for 2 years. We've had no defaults. But we build a relationship with that client. And what is designed for that client is according to where their business is at. And I would say the two biggest areas that we look at where they need additional support is strategy. Strategy is a big issue, try and help them set the strategic direction, which then, helps inform what they focus on as an entrepreneur. And the other area is financial management. Those are the two key issues. And what we're trying to do now is we are trying to narrow down sort of what are the most catalytic things that you can do, I guess, for the least amount of investment that will deliver the same outcomes. So, because we know we've been experimenting. So we now that we've been doing it for 2 years, we understand what are the key issues and what do we need to put in place. Some of them are absolutely fine and you don't have to do anything. But many of them just require that additional support, So yeah, that's really, and I often think of, I don't know if you must know SAF. SAF is a micro lender. And I often think, there's just, in the early days, it is about relationships. I mean, theirs is all about relationships. And it is with us too, and there are times when entrepreneurs get themselves into trouble. Often in January, they really struggle to pay their loans. And you have to allow some flexibility for that, and work with the entrepreneur to, and the cash flow situation they find themselves in. If you start penalizing them, you're not going to get your money back. And so we really work with them on that. And I think there are others who do this as well. I think Edge Growth has done a fairly good job on this as well. But these are the types of models we really need to look at. I mean, in our case, we are not an enterprise and supply development organization. We're an ownership scheme. And so we work with any entrepreneur in any sector. And we do have a rural mandate. And I think what we have been able to achieve because of that is really significant, because if you build a rural business in an area where there is a lack of goods and services that people are prepared to pay for, you're creating jobs in a very underserved area. And so we, I think, and those guys don't have the networks to access finance and things like that. So I just think we need to think about it more comprehensively as a country, and you can't just look at the return on investment for the lender. You have to, if you say as a country job creation is your biggest challenge, then you have to really have a strategy around it, invest wisely, and provide the type of support that's going to shift these small businesses into bigger businesses.
It reminds me of a comment from the former Dean of Gibbs, Nick Binedell, to a group of banking executives at Gibbs, where they were all talking about, their high-level, C-suite level strategic plans and goals. And, they all put up that they're competing to be the biggest kind of bank in South Africa. And they didn't really want to talk about the political situation. I think at the time there was a lot of locking off of any executive heads who raised their heads above the parapet from the political establishment at the time. And so there was a culture, I think, of, a bit of fear of speaking out. But, Nick said we have to, as business leaders, get involved. We have to take a deeper understanding of the context of South Africa, because otherwise you're going to be competing to be the biggest bank in Zimbabwe. Because if you as businesses don't take ownership of this issue of creating employment, of creating entrepreneurship, of giving hope to the, 60% now unemployed youth in the country, then we are sitting on something that is a tinderbox waiting to burn. And the match is standing there on the sidelines now. We see the populists are banging on the door. So I think it's such an important national conversation that we should have around this. And I know you've said we don't have a shortage of ideas. We've got a shortage of access in South Africa. So as a concluding ideal thought, what's the most urgent lever we can pull, maybe policy-wise, financially, or socially, to change that dynamic?
I'm not so good on policy stuff, so I won't comment on that. But I will just say is that we need a national strategy for entrepreneurship development that takes into account all the lessons learned so far, taking the input from all of these ESD things that are operating in silos and isolation, plus what government's done, and say, okay, if we, as a nation, we have a major problem, and we can either keep sitting and doing our own little thing on the side, or we can come together as a nation and say, okay, we need a strategy, and we are going to stick with that strategy. And then we all start pulling in the same direction. I think what happens in South Africa a lot is people spray and pray, and we're not measuring. So, if we need something where we all say, okay, this is what it's going to take, and these are the interventions that we are going to put in place. And, if if CIFA, for example, already previously had a 45% loan default rate, surely we have to look at financing differently, because, having low interest loans and using some of that as grant money, I don't know, to unlock more opportunities is better than carrying on with the fund and you lose half the money. So I don't know. I just feel like we need to look at it much more strategically.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to ask you what lies ahead for the SAB Foundation. Obviously, you want to build on the foundation that you've established over the last 10 years. But are there any new frontiers that you're hoping to explore in the next 5 years, or just to continue with the kind of growth that you've established already, which is phenomenal? I mean, I was reading through the report, and I mean, the stories, that peppered with remarkable stories. Busi Nkomalo of Edwaleni Hardware, Mapa Logistics, which is digitizing township suppliers. I mean, bees, honey, all over the place. Fantastic human stories. And the report shows that the supported businesses now generate over 2 billion rand in annual turnover, which is almost 120% increase since inception. So I suppose the big challenge for you is to ensure that growth is now sustainable and to build from there.
Yeah, I think we want to extend the loan fund. The loan fund was almost like a pilot, and now we've incorporated it into our strategy. So, we've just recapitalized it after 2 years, and the whole intention of it is to be almost an action learning project. So we are documenting everything, and we want to share it widely so others can replicate it. And then this financial literacy issue we'd really like to tackle. We've done quite a lot of research on it, but we haven't got to the point yet where we think, okay, this is the kind of program or whatever you should design to address it. We're not there yet. It's a very challenging issue. And then the other thing that we are doing is, and this is this field impact investing. And again, what you'll see in our impact report is that we support a lot of innovation that's trying to solve social problems in the country. And Mappa Logistics, where they are doing township deliveries and supporting local restaurants and things like that. That's one example. We have hundreds of those kinds of businesses. Globally, they have a lot of interest globally, but the challenge is there is also a big gap in funding. So we, as a foundation, we are funding them in their early stages. But now what we're thinking of doing, and that might involve some changes in policy, which friends are working on, is can a foundation take a portion of its endowment and use it for unlisted investing that's going to solve social problems in the country? So instead of having an endowment that's all enlisted assets that aren't doing very much, can you take your endowment and use some of it to actually try and accelerate growth of these types of entities, to accelerate development? So globally, that's happening a lot. There's big foundations overseas that are all doing it, but in South Africa, it's fairly new. So we are in the process of setting that equity fund up.
Very exciting. I mean, impact kind of private equity type model, I think could do quite well in South Africa because it's patient capital and it uses all of the benefits and advantages that we've just discussed. And
absolutely.
Has that exceptional social return on investment. And I often think in South Africa, when we talk about ESG, we really need to talk about the capital S more than anything else, because it's these kinds of social challenges that we need to be solving for. Thank you very much. If the numbers don't make the case, I think the stories certainly do. And we've seen from bees to bursaries to bricks. I think the SAB Foundation is proving that investing where others don't isn't just corporate philanthropy. It's potentially a blueprint, perhaps, for how to drive inclusive growth in South Africa with real staying power. So Bridgit Evans, thank you very much, Executive Director of the SAB Foundation. Thanks for your time and for the important work that you and your team continue to do in turning impact into action in South Africa.
Thank you, Michael. And if anyone would like to look at that report, it's on our website, www.sabfoundation.co.za.
Fantastic. Well, there you have it. Go and download a copy. Really interesting, 70 pages. Bridgit Evans, Executive Director of the SAB Foundation, here on Business Talk, only on Business Tech.